Once again, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm Reverend Casimir Brown. I serve as the National Director of Religious Affairs for the Repairs of the Breach and the co-lead for the National Faith Team of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. I just want to once again thank you for all for being here in this room. For those who are just joining us in this room and on live stream, we are gathering here as moral leaders to raise a moral emergency that is happening in this country. We have a fusion delegation of religious and faith leaders from across the country representing local churches, state bodies, and national faith bodies in this. Opportunity to hear why, rooted in their faith tradition, why Congress must act now. Act now when it comes to having a vote for living wages. Act now when it comes to voting rights. Act now when it comes to reinstating the policies that lifted millions of people out of poverty. And all of our faith traditions say something a little bit about justice. And it says a little bit something about poverty and what to do and what the expectations of those who are serving community. So we are glad that you are all here today. I want to make sure I have the opportunity to introduce Representative Rokana as well, gathering us here today. Thank you so much, and we'll be able to offer up a few words before we also get started. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to welcome everyone. What an honor for the Congress. Reverend Barber called me and he said there were 50 distinguished clergy from around the country who wanted to come in on the Moral Revival campaign to help inform our conversation in Congress. We're really honored to have people here all the way from Alabama and Georgia and North Carolina and Ohio and some from the West. It's really a tremendous honor. And I want to just have my colleagues who are taking time, it's a very busy day, a lot of votes, introduce themselves and say a few words. And then I know Reverend Barber is going to join us in a few minutes. So Jan, do you want to do that?
Is it on? Not sure. I'm Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. I've had the privilege of being in the Congress. I'm in my 24th year. You know, we could talk a lot about the challenges that we have, but I also want to mainly focus on the opportunities. We have an opportunity in less than 60 days to make transformative changes in our country. If we get everyone out to participate, the sky will be the limit. I want you to think about the things that we could get passed here in the Congress, the things that we could get accomplished in the community to create justice and equity and bring a better life to millions and millions of Americans. And so I know that you're going to work on that on the election in just a few weeks to make sure that our dreams come true. So thank you.
Good morning. I am so incredibly honored to be with all of you today. And as a former community organizer, I have to bring my district into the room when they cannot sometimes be here. I represent the third poorest congressional district in the country, and so your work in giving credibility to those that currently are being impacted by doing nothing on poverty, doing nothing about access to our democracy and being inclusive, doing nothing about the right to breathe clean air, the right to access to water. I come and I grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, the city of Detroit, where literally we were on the front lines of people banging on the doors to stop the count. We are literally from a community that was targeted, even though we did an incredible job making sure that everybody has access to the polls by passing ballot measures to make it easier to vote in Michigan. They still targeted the predominantly black city in the state of Michigan. I also come from a community that continues, and Chair Ro Khanna just came from my district, and we're going to follow up in making sure that people, again, have some sort of access to justice through Congress on environmental racism and how, again, communities of color are taking the brunt of not doing anything about the climate crisis. I am also the eldest of 14. and grew up in a very large, yes, and that's probably best prepared me for Congress, more than my law degree. But I know how difficult it is to be in systems that others you, but also seeing the struggles of many of my parents struggle, but also seeing my brothers and sisters continue to struggle. I leave you with all of this. I think, we all assume that folks understand what's going on. Many of you are in the front lines of hearing the human tragedies and the human impact. Please bring those stories. I know you hear it a lot, but it's so important because I always remind my colleagues, through Tears of a Mother, she says to me, their early childhood program ended at one of the local churches in Southwest Detroit, and through tears said, "But you don't understand, Rashida, this is where my child eats twice a day. I need a program." So you all bring those stories, and please continue to do that, because I feel like sometimes that's what can move the hearts and minds of many of my colleagues and have them move with urgency. I know I always tell President Biden, I'm just on a different timeline. So I know I'm not going to be the one I'm just like, our folks can't wait another day. They really can't. And so thank you again for being here, and thank you, Chair Khanna, for helping bring us all together this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Manning. I represent North Carolina's 6th Congressional District. It is a privilege for me to be here with everyone today. I'm so glad to see so many leaders of different faith traditions with us. My faith teaches me justice you shall pursue. And we are told the word justice is repeated twice because it is that important for us to pursue justice. My faith tradition also teaches me that every individual is made in the image of God, and therefore every individual should have the right to a job that pays a living wage so that every individual can support their family. Each child can attend a school that is high quality so they can get the job preparation that they need to be able to have good jobs. Every individual deserves to live in a decent home, to be able to put food on their table. There are so many things to have the health care they need, and every individual deserves the right to vote and have their vote counted. In North Carolina, we specialize in gerrymandering, and we have to put an end to that, and we will do that if everyone has the opportunity to vote. So thank you. I didn't know I was going to give a speech here today, but I'm delighted to be with you. I want to thank each and every one of you for everything you do every day. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Bobby Scott. I represent the 3rd District of Virginia, and I chair the House Committee on Education and Labor. We're in a Congress where the focus has traditionally been on the wealthy. So we passed a tax cut a couple of years ago where 80% of benefits were scheduled to go to the top 1% in corporations. And this group is here to remind us that our focus ought to be on the least of these.
Yes.
I like to not do what a lot of people do, and that's what's called celebrate the problem. We know what the problem is. Some people can give great speeches on how bad the problem is. I like to work on solutions. And so as chair of the Education and Labor Committee, there's some things we're working on and have done, like raise the wage, $15 an hour, that's passed the House. We also know that people who can join a union make significantly more wages, work in a safer workplace, get better benefits. And so the Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, has passed the House twice. That's we got to talk to the Senate. Those with better education get the best jobs, so access to college is important. And we just introduced legislation after the president did the $10,000 or $20,000 discharge to double the Pell Grant, make sure the public service loan forgiveness program is better, and significantly reduce the interest rate and let people refinance into those interest rates so people going to college can get some benefit, not just those who have already gone to college. We need to return to the days where you can actually work your way through college and come out with no debt. Before you get to college, obviously K through 12 is important. In the American Rescue Plan, we put more money into K through 12 education than any legislation in the history of the United States. And we distributed the money according to the Title I formula, where poverty is the biggest factor. And so those low-income areas that needed the most got the most. And in the disparity, wealthy areas were getting about $300 to $500 per student. Low-income areas were getting about $5,000 per student. We're enhancing child nutrition with school lunches, fighting discrimination, and we've got to reinstate the child tax credit. This group that's child poverty dropped almost 50%. So we got to get that back in. And as we talk about voting, we have to recognize that not only voting is in jeopardy, but democracy is in jeopardy. 2/3 of the Republicans voted to overturn the election after the insurrection. So we have to make sure that the right people are elected, those that respect democracy, so after our votes are cast, they're actually counted. Look forward to the discussion and the reminder of who our focus ought to be, and that is, of course, the least of these.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. So we hear it from our representatives that there's opportunities, but there's also a need to act now. There's opportunities, yes, but there's a need to act right now. And so we know that in this movement, we do nothing without hearing our voices from our impacted leaders from across the country. So I would like to direct our attention to the screen and to hear the voices of those who are impacted in this country, the 140 million.
Now is the time for a third Reconstruction. We are the rejected, who've been rejected by the politics of trickle-down economics and rejected by neoliberalism. Until children are protected, until sick folk are healed, until low-wage workers are paid, until immigrants are treated fairly, until affordable houses are provided, until the atmosphere, the land, and the water are protected, until saving the world and diplomacy and living in peace is more important than blowing up the world. We won't be silent anymore. If we've got to march, we'll march. If we've got to engage in nonviolent direct action, we'll engage. If we've got to give more attention with the media, if we have to ask workers to make election day a labor strike day, we'll do it. But until then, we won't be silent or unseen or unheard anymore.
Somebody hurting our families, and it's going on. But we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear?
Hope comes from the bottom, from those most directly impacted by the profound evils of America. It's the poor, it's the low wage, it's the locked up, looked over and left out. It's those excluded and exploited who are the very social force who can change this society.
We're calling upon those who have ears to hear, tongues to speak, and hearts to respond, to join the movement to rid this nation of the evil and violence of poverty.
I have been struggling to pay my bills since I've been working at 16 years old. I work full-time 64 hours a week, 7 days a week. I am exhausted.
We are here today on behalf of every worker and every voter fighting for a government that works for all.
to protect voting rights. We are here to fight for immigration reform.
As a teacher, I want a better future and planet for our children by addressing gun violence and working together to solving our climate crisis.
There are poor and homeless veterans all over this country. We must stand together to demand an end to this war economy that benefits the wealthy at the cost of poor people's lives and health.
Our government finds it necessary to ban abortion, to say that they are saving our children. But more children die as a result of poverty in this country.
I'm here because I'm holding fast to that promise of freedom that our ancestors fought for. They were fighting for our ability to control our own bodies, to determine our own futures, to be the architects of our own destinies. And that's the fight that we're fighting right now.
This system doesn't provide health care or living wages, but it wages chemical warfare.
We should not be cornered and forced to choose one necessity over another.
I am here to tell you, incarcerated lives matter too. We are forgotten people. We are poor people, and we are suffering.
I have been faced with many challenges in my life due to a broken system that has a long history of punishing the poor while rewarding the corrupt, wealthy class.
It's time for us to stop being passive Christians. We gotta get up.
That's it, bro.
We gotta get off of those comfortable pews.
That's it.
We gotta get out of these churches.
That's it.
We gotta get out here and we gotta advocate for the least of these.
And so we stand on that principle in this country, that no matter where we live, no matter what my background is, no matter who I love, no matter what I can do, at the end of the day, I am deserving to be treated like a human being.
Our votes this November are not a show of support. They are a demand.
We are here. We are the poor and dispossessed, and we are here.
Yeah, now is our time for a third Reconstruction. We are not an insurrection, but we are a resurrection.
Ni un paso atrás.
We are the 140 million, the poor and low-income people in this country. We are the 140 million poor and low-income people in this country, and we won't be silent anymore. For those who might be new to this space, we have a saying in the movement, we say forward together, forward together, not one step back. And so we are moving forward. I would like to introduce our co-chairs, Bishop William J. Barber II and Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, who will now offer framing and grounding words for us. Can we welcome them here today?
Good morning. It's so great to have this powerful group of faith leaders, impacted folk from across this country, from faith bodies representing millions upon millions of people in this country. And it's so great to have the representatives here with us who have been standing strong and who are committed to continuing to fight. I just want to frame us a little bit this morning and really looking forward to having a chance to hear from folks from all across the country. But we're here. We're here because, as last week in the headlines we heard, the official poverty numbers from the U.S. Census are down. But it's important to note that these numbers are down based on an antiquated and inadequate poverty measure, but also because of temporary relief from the child tax credit, and the fact that has not been extended, that it has not been expanded, that we haven't seen the minimum wage raised, that we are still fighting for our voting rights, means that millions upon millions of people's lives are being cut short. So we're here for this briefing to call on Congress to do 3 votes before the midterms. We'll hear more about that, but we need to vote on living wages. We got to vote again. We need to vote on voting rights. And we ought to vote on programs of social uplift like the child tax credit. That is the morally right and the economically smart thing to do. We're gathered here to celebrate the progress that has happened, but to demand more. We're not coasting into the midterms. We're asking Congress to put forward legislation that could lift the load of poverty. To do this before November and to show that if there are representatives, if there are senators who are willing to stand against lifting tens of millions of people out of poverty and economic precarity, that it's within the power of people, especially poor and low-income people, to vote those politicians out who stand against us. And so we're sending a message that the real issues of our day are health care and living wages and voting rights and protections for kids and health care and all this. And so we stand today with that message. Amos said, "Woe to those who lie on beds of ivory and stretch themselves out on their couches, but are not grieved over the ruin of Joseph." Today we have faith leaders and impacted folk from across this country who are saying, we will not be moved.
I want to model 2 minutes. Because if we start out wrong, we're going to end up wrong. And everybody in here is a preacher. And part of the reason for bringing folk together is that we don't have to say it all. We need to hear some other voices saying things. So I want to do this very quickly and then begin to get to these powerful clergy leaders to talk about why, from their vantage point and the people that they are in the midst of and the people they minister to, what we're calling for is a must. Now, I've been lied to because I was told in March of this year that nothing else could get done in Congress this year. And then the IRA got done. I was lied to by Congress people and by people in very high places. The midterms is over. I mean, you can't get nothing done. Now I hear there's a police bill coming up. Everything that got left out, and we support and celebrate all that got in the IRA, but everything that was left out would impact poor people. And we need some votes. Win, lose, or draw. Folk need to go to the polls and be able to look and say, know exactly where their one vote on voting rights? Really? One vote on living wages? And 49 Republicans and 2 Democrats say no? And that's all you get? One vote on extra. And so we're saying to our brothers and sisters who have been with us, we did a little research, and there's a parliamentary rule that if you vote yes, you can recall a vote. You can recall a vote. Don't tell us it can't be done. And that's why we got the strength here today. Those of you who've been there, Bobby, you've been there, Connie, you've been there. But we're in a moral crisis. We put out a piece yesterday, 50 million people are going to experience some form of voter suppression because we've not restored the Voting Rights Act and passed the original John Lewis bill that the guy who amended the original John Lewis bill didn't vote for it himself. What the hell is that about? And 50 million people will experience continual poverty because we've not raised the minimum wage in 13 years, Bishop Ashtar. 13 years. And 20 million people can be thrown back into poverty because we've not kept the policies that were implemented during COVID, even though 68% of all the monies that really were given during COVID went to corporations. And billionaires made $2 trillion while poor people got poorer. I want to show you some click size and I'm through. This is 140 million people in this country who are poor and low wealth. That you saw 111, that's the people who were dropped because of the policies passed during COVID. It's going right back up, I hate to say. That's 43% of this nation. That's 52% of this church. That's a moral crisis, y'all. In North Carolina, look up there, that's 4 million people. And in North Carolina, 49% of the people in that state who work for less than a living wage. 49%. And we have the data on every one of these states. Look at Texas, 12 million. And I don't know why politicians aren't talking to these people, because that's your power, that's your voting base. But most of the ads, all we hear about is January 6th and abortion, which we are all for in terms of women's right to choose and dealing with the insurrection. But look at those numbers. Next slide. Every age, it's not just about race. It's the intersection of race and class, every race, every age, every gender. And poverty is a policy choice. Next one. Look at the populations. Next one. After transfers, after some of the policy. Look at the next one. Federal minimum wage, $7.25 is the lowest value in 66 years. That's a moral emergency. Nearly 1/3 of all U.S. labor force earns less than $15 an hour. A true housing wage would be up to $21 an hour. Next one. Excuse me, go back. There's nowhere in the nation where a full-time job earning federal minimum wage can support an average 2-bedroom apartment. I would say any preacher that's out here preaching and you worry about your pastor appreciation service, but you're not fighting for the poor in the street, something wrong with your whole morality. Next one. State minimum wage laws. Look at that. Next one. 87 million people uninsured or underinsured. 12 states have not expanded. Next one. Next one. Next one. Look at 55 million people, not just black people. Why do we keep framing voting rights as a black issue only? Why? 55 million people are facing suppression. And all that's because for 9 years, we've not restored the Voting Rights Act. Next. Voter suppression law since 2010. Didn't start with the big lie. Stop telling America that. It started with a lie much older. Next one. More than 50 million voters in 2020 were poor and or low wealth. Think about that. More than 50 million, and that left about 27, 28 million off. In 45 states, poor and low wealth people counted for at least 20% of the votes they cast. In 12 states, including battleground states, poor and low wealth people counted for 39 to 47% of the electorate. Why are we not talking to them? Why can't we get people to even say the word poor up here? They said people trying to get into the American middle class. Poor and low wealth. Next. Look at the power. Look at the power. 47% of the electorate in North Carolina is poor and low wealth. Low wage. 38% in Texas. 48% in Florida. In Florida, it only would take 4% of poor and low wealth people who are already registered, who haven't voted, to vote that could overcome any margin of victory. In Michigan, it's 1%. In North Carolina, it's 19%. In fact, Representative Collins, that map right there shows the percentage of poor and low income voters that would have to vote, that haven't voted, that could change every election in this country, and they are already registered. The number one reason we've been all over this country, they say they don't vote, nobody talks to us. Nobody talks to us. So we brought a core of religious leaders and others to come here today to take their time to say why to you. These are some of the most powerful religious leaders in this country. Much more powerful than Liz and I. And they're our friends, but more important, they're the friends of people, and they're here to declare there's a moral emergency. We're not fussing at our friends. We thank you for giving us this space, because this is going out live stream all over the nation. It's going to be sent to every member of Congress, because I just found out this morning. I kept wondering, why couldn't the staff, Liz, get the parking straight? I need to apologize to you, Rope Conley. It wasn't you. It wasn't your staff. It was God. I thought it was the staff. Walking here, I found out it was God. God said, I'm going to make you experience what poor people experience. I'm going to make you experience before you go in there what poor folk experience if they dare try to come in these halls. I'm going to make you experience. And I'm going to make you never be comfortable that you can get in. I'm going to make you feel this morning what it feels like to be handicapped and poor, disabled and poor and low wage. And you cannot even get in. You can't park. You can't get through the gate. Thank you, God, for reminding me what Ezekiel 22 says. Your politicians have become like wolves, devouring the people. But what is worse is your priests have supported them. Can I find a person that will stand in the gap that I might not destroy the nation? We are those who've come to stand in the gap.
I would now like to introduce our first set of testifiers. We have Rabbi Michael Pollock from Pennsylvania, Pastor Neil Tellier from Georgia, Bishop Buddy from the Washington Diocese of the Episcopal Church, and Reverend Dr. James Morris from Florida. Yes, and we can begin your 2 minutes, and I will be here to help with guiding that as well.
And remember, this is one of Bishop Fairchild's people, so she knows how to do this.
Former parliamentarian. Rabbi Pollock, thank you.
Rabbi Michael Pollock, coming from Pennsylvania. 2,600 years ago, the prophet Isaiah walked into the Capitol in Jerusalem and said, "Your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves. They chase after bribes. The widow and the orphan's cause does not come before them." We see what happens in Congress and state legislatures and city and county councils all over. Bribes come in, policy violence comes out. Congress is always so quick to serve the money and so slow to serve the people. It says in Deuteronomy, "Do not take a bribe, because bribes blind the eyes of the wise and twist the words of the righteous." Congress doesn't see us. Congress doesn't hear us, because if Congress did, they would do something. We need Congress. We need you to stop being blinded by systemic bribery. We need Congress to see us, to hear us, and to love us. Perhaps the most central and foundational blessing in the entire Hebrew Bible is the priestly blessing. And it asks that God turn God's face toward us with grace. It asks that God's face shine upon us and be merciful to us and make peace. As is noted again and again over thousands of years by every rabbi everywhere in the world, God's face will only turn to us when we turn toward God and when we turn toward each other. You cannot turn toward God while turning toward idols of money and power. You cannot dance around the golden calf and serve the people. We need Congress to turn away from the Chamber of Commerce and to love the God who declares liberty and jubilee for all the people. We need Congress to turn away from Lockheed and Boeing and war profiteers who plunder our budgets to make war, and we need you to turn toward the God who makes peace and loves justice. We need you to turn away from the hordes of lobbyists and their billionaire backers who every day sacrifice our children on altars of greed and power. We need you to turn toward the God who commands us to pursue justice, so that you may live. Stop operating by the wrong golden rule. Instead of the guy with the gold makes the rules, we need to operate by love your neighbor like you love yourself. We need Congress to legislate like it loves the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I want you all to know, too, that the persons sitting here have been on the front line of pushing the vote. We invited everybody. Some of them not going to come. But as we talk to you, understand we're talking to them that ain't here, so that there's a record. Because if there's not a briefing in Congress, there's no record. And so thank you so much for allowing this space. Next.
Greetings. My name is Reverend Neal, and I stand here on behalf of the 4.6 million poor and low-income people, and I sadly admit that includes 1.4 million children in the state of Georgia. And the varied faith leaders, many represented here today, that diligently serve them daily. The Bible says that when the prophet Nehemiah, a leader of the Jewish exile, came back to lead the beginning of rebuilding the wall, he became extremely angry as they completed and heard the outcry and complaints of his people. What was the outcry that caused this anger, hurt, resentment, and fear in his people? It was their leaders taking advantage of his people. It was the leaders treating them as if they weren't people at all. It was the leaders causing them pain, not doing the things necessary to take care of them as if they were people at all. In the state of Georgia, we currently rank 34th in all states in the quality of child education. 65% of fourth graders are not proficient in reading. 69% of eighth graders are not proficient in math. 1.7 million people benefit from SNAP. 580,000 children live in food insecure households. Every day, children go hungry. The free lunch program has ended. We're not even the first semester in, and children are already getting bagged lunches because they can't get a free hot lunch anymore.
30 seconds.
It is time for you to bring a vote on a living wage, universal health care, voting rights, and reinstating and expanding policies that will help to lift millions of our families out of poverty. Forward together.
Not one step back.
Good morning, I'm Mary Ann Buddy. I serve as the Episcopal Bishop of the Diocese of Washington, which encompasses the District of Columbia, and whose residents, including me, yet to have full representation in these chambers, and 4 of the most populous counties in Maryland. And as you know, within this region are some of the most affluent communities in the nation and some of the poorest. Children who attend the finest schools that money can buy, others consigned to those understaffed and woefully under-resourced. Families that live in luxury, others live in rat-infested apartments or in the rural areas in homes with no running water and electricity. This region boasts of some of the finest restaurants and grocery stores that I dare say every one of us have enjoyed. And yet a growing number of faith communities have ministries that are burgeoning at the seams trying to address food insecurity. In one such program run out of one of our churches, 1,100 families depend on weekly distributions of food. In another, in what appears to be an affluent neighborhood, hundreds of people line up every week for an allotment of 2 grocery bags. And most of these people who seek assistance work 2 to 3 jobs and do not earn a living wage. Now, every day, as Reverend Barber said, we have to decide with whom we will stand in the communities we serve, and I know that you know that too. And I know that you know that this economic disparity, which has shockingly increased over our lifetimes, is the root cause of nearly every one of our social ills that we put Band-Aids on trying to address. The result of public policy decisions made under the undue influence of those who stand to benefit most from the disparities we all know. And we are not naive. Those who benefit from these policies, as they are, would prefer and work very hard to keep those consigned to poverty silenced and invisible. But this movement exists so that they will not be silent, and neither will we. Every day we have to decide whom we will serve. And we are here simply to remind you that you do too. to remind you of your sacred duty as elected officials of this democracy. And specifically, we are here to speak in one voice, asking you to take the positions that have been so eloquently described by my colleagues here in this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Forward together.
That
Now,
one step back.
Thank you. I'm James Morris, one of the chairs of the Florida Poor People's Campaign, and represent the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church for the state of Florida. The prophet Zechariah says, "Do not oppress the widow, the fatherless, the sojourner, or the poor, and let none of you devise evil against another in your heart." What you've heard thus far from this cadre of faith leaders and what you will hear after me must not be heard or thought of as merely political discourse, hermeneutical, or theological excursus. No, our collective aim is to embolden you with a basis of motivation for action. We've come to say America must adopt a holistic commitment to social, economic, and political justice. For far too long, people living in the richest country in the world have been forced to work void of living wages. The right to vote, which was won by blood, sweat, and tears, has been eroded, and those policies which will lift millions of families out of poverty have not been enacted. We've come to say to you, our lawmakers, it is your responsibility. You, by virtue of your offices, have been gifted and privileged by the voters with the opportunity, the purse, and the power to affirm all persons' dignity, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We've come to advocate for our brothers and sisters who experienced firsthand the brutal weight of American injustice. We've come bearing their concerns, their longings, and their pleadings. These demands must become the bedrock for an America where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is not just a phrase on the pages of the Declaration of Independence. No, these unalienable rights must truly become the rights given by the Creator to all Americans. So we've come here across the width and breadth of this nation to say we stand for solidarity. We stand for our brothers and sisters. What is our aim? Our aim is that everybody will be able to say, this is my country, land of my birth. This is my country, grandest on earth. We want to say it. We pledge our allegiance to America. Help us say that.
All right.
Amen.
Amen.
Forward together.
Not one step back. Thank you. We would now like to welcome Sheila Katz from the National Council of Jewish Women, Reverend Terry Hord Owens, President and General Secretary of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Rabbi Alana Suskin from Maryland, Poor People's Campaign, and Reverend Tani Allgood from Alabama, Poor People's Campaign.
As they are being seated, we want folk to know, especially our representatives, that we're going to be, as I said, sending this to the entire out. We're calling on Progressive Caucus and others to hear us in terms of calling for these votes prior to November's election. We're going to be drawing a joint letter to the Speaker and to minority leader on both sides of the aisle saying that this needs to happen. I want you to understand these people represent millions of congregants and communities. And one thing we have started saying is to Congress, we don't want to be invited to pray anymore. Yep. We do a lot of praying. We want to be invited to speak prophetically at these hearings. We want a clergy person when you're talking about health care. We want a religious leader when you're talking about banking. We want a religious leader when you're talking about living wages, because all of those are moral issues. All of them are deeply, how we deal with them are deeply dangerous for the nation, to be quite honest. And those of you who have been on the front line, we are here to bring a moral, it ain't Democrat or Republican, but a moral force that can be backed up by millions of congregants that we can speak to. So here, again, these who are coming on the record today, both denominational leaders and pastors who I want to just emphasize represent millions of people, black, white, brown, Asian, Native, all across the board.
Reverend Martin, can we just had one other colleague, a leader, Robin Kelly, join us just for 30 seconds since we've all introduced ourselves.
Thank you.
My name is Robin Kelly. I represent the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois. If you know Chicago, it's urban, suburban, and rural. So I start in the city and I go all the way down to Kankakee. I have over 1,200 farms in my district, but I love my district because it is diverse. And I just want to thank all of you for what you're doing. I am the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, so I will remember what you just said when I put on my next conference. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. And for those farmers, we can bring farmers who are families are committing suicide
Yes.
because they are poor and low wealth. And the policies like living wages and what we're talking about is so important to them. We can bring those to the table. And we thank you, glad the Black Caucus, because 60.9% of black people are poor and low wealth. So that's got to be a front there.
And just so you know, I do a lot of work with my
I know you
farmers.
do.
I have a great relationship.
That's right. And as we said to those who are coming in, we want you to hear this. Do not take offense at what they're saying. We know those of you who've been on the front line, but we're trying to get some stuff on the record. And last time we came, not 2 times before, some folk kept saying, but you know, we're trying. We understand that. That's not, we're not talking. They're putting stuff on the record that hasn't got on the record, and we will be intensifying over the next years our agitation.
Yes.
All right. Yes.
If we could just have Barbara Lee as well, because if you want to say 30 seconds.
Oh, 30. Well, once again, your voices are badly needed here on Capitol Hill, and just thank you very much. I'm so pleased that my colleagues are here. Thank you, Congressman Connell, for pulling us together. But Bishop Barber and the Poor People's Campaign is a campaign. It's a voice really for the people. And we need your voices here more than ever. So thank you again. Good seeing everybody.
You're chair of
the task force on poverty and opportunity. And also politically, we've been working on the third Reconstruction language on the other side. If you know, I think you know what we did at the DNC, and I think that things are moving ahead in terms of building broader base support for our resolution.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'll talk about that in a minute when we come to that, because we want folk to understand the resolution is a part of it, but the vote on living wage has got to happen. The resolution says what we must resolve to do, but these votes before November being called, whether people vote against or no, must happen so folk can see where people stand. And as I said at the beginning, I don't want anybody else telling me we can't do nothing before the midterm, because we sat here and watched things happen when we were told that they could not happen.
That's right.
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Sheila Katz, CEO of National Council of Jewish Women, a Jewish feminist civil rights organization that has been working for equity and justice for women, children, and families for 129 years. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, begins in just a few days. For Jews, this is a time to reflect on who we've been and decide who we want to be. It's a time for cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul, and teshuvah, the work of repentance and repair. This starts from acknowledging and addressing harms in order to make things right in all the ways we can. What a symbolic time to be coming together here today, because our country is broken. People are suffering, and we must do better. We're here today to call on Congress to bring dignity to those who are struggling most in our country. And let me be clear, it is a policy decision that millions of children are living in poverty. It is a policy decision that millions of families are living paycheck to paycheck. It is a policy decision that millions of people are going to be forced to be pregnant. That 25% of women who must return to work within only 10 days of giving birth. That people don't have access to vote. That people don't have access to clean, drinkable water. And that families don't have access to affordable childcare. We're here together to say that a moral America is possible. People in this building get to decide our path forward. We must center our policies around those whose suffering we do not always see. We must build a community with love. We must fight for a better future where women, children, and families cannot just exist but thrive. This weekend, Jews around the world will blow the shofar, the ram's horn, to wake us from our spiritual and emotional slumber and urge us to act. So, too, we must sound the alarm from coast to coast to protest complacency and proclaim loudly that a moral America that cares about families is possible and worth fighting for. And we are looking at you, Congress, to alleviate the barriers that hold so many Americans back. This is a moral emergency. The call is now.
Call us now.
All together.
Not one step back.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Terry Hoard Owens, and I serve as General Minister and President of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada, and I am a resident of the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois, and so proud that you are my representative, Representative Kelly. I'm committed as a Christian to building the society where all have enough. In the biblical story of Jesus' feeding of the 5,000, I think it's not just a miracle story, it is a parable from which we can learn and draw solutions. A large crowd gathers to hear Jesus, and the disciples say they are hungry, and Jesus asks them, "What do you have?" A boy offers his small lunch. Jesus doesn't wave a magic wand, he simply instructs the disciples to distribute the food. And it turns out that when we share all that we have, there is enough. In fact, there is abundance left over. So what if we took what we have and distributed it according to Jesus' principle of loving neighbor and making sure that everyone has enough? Amen. From the abundant resources of this nation, there is enough for a living wage to provide for our families. There is enough to ensure safe and affordable housing. There is enough to provide health care for all. There is enough to ensure that our education for our children is not tied to zip codes. Loving our neighbor also means that we value all of our voices and that we ensure that voting rights are secured at all. And we need not wait, we cannot wait. These are actions that our elected officials can take now. So I join with my colleagues to call upon Congress to act now to pass legislation that ensures that this nation can be a place where all can thrive, with living wages, safe and affordable housing, health care. There is enough. And we simply must make up our minds that we value the lives of each one enough to use the abundant resources of this nation to ensure thriving and prosperity for all. Thank you.
Not one step back.
I am Rabbi Alana Suskin. I'm one of the chairs of the Maryland Poor People's Campaign. Good morning to the honorable Congress people, my fellow citizens who represent me and the people of America in this sacred place. Why do I call this place sacred? In Jewish law, there's an obligation. The Torah instructs in several places that there shall be one and the same law for all citizens and residents. Mishpat echad yihiyeh lachem kager ke'ezrach yihiyeh ki ani Adonai Elohechem. Torah achat yihiyeh le'ezrach v'lager hagar b'tochacham. Chukat achat yihiyeh lachem v'lager u'le'ezrach haaretz. Mishpat, Torah, chuk. 3 different words for law, all saying the same thing. This building, this city, is the place in which that duty to God and one another should be carried out. And yet we know that in truth it is not. We, the people, have failed in that obligation. There are 3 ways in which this Congress has specifically failed our nation: universal health care, a living wage, and protecting voting rights. Jewish law is very clear that health care is an obligation of society for all of its members. The Tzitz Eliezer writes that it is a requirement for the community to set aside a fund for care of the sick, and when poor people are ill and cannot afford medical expenses, the community sends them a doctor to visit them, and the medicine is paid for by the communal fund. Similarly, the rabbinic sources prohibit wages which are too low to be considered reasonable. The Jewish tradition is clear that we do not allow a worker to be paid less than an amount they can support themselves and their family on. And finally, the Jewish tradition emphasizes both that all of us have an obligation to be involved in matters of the community, of electing leaders, And it also asserts that a leader may not govern without the community being consulted and agreeing to that governance. These two principles, stated in a number of places, make clear both that there is a religious duty to vote and that there is a societal duty to consult its citizens via their vote. As an Orthodox rabbi, I stand with my community and the people of this nation to demand that Congress take another vote regarding these three things: living wage, voting rights, and universal health care. Congress has held only that one vote regarding living wages and voting rights, and we cannot wait for another electoral season to occur before Congress decides to take action. Too many people are impacted right now by voter suppression, lack of living wages, lack of health care, and the cuts in policies that address poverty. Every day, Jews pray, "Blessed is God, Ohev tzedakah u'mishpat," the one who loves justice and law. Is this justice? Are our laws ones which would satisfy the one who loves just law? It is impossible to accept that you have done all that you can. We know that you are capable of more. Each of our representatives must now answer a moral question. Whom do you serve?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Do you serve all the people, or do you serve only millionaires and powerful special interests? We see you. We see our representatives not standing up for people they represent,
Rabbi,
and we will continue to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Forward together.
Not one step back. Reverend Tani.
I'm Reverend Tani Allgood from Mobile, Alabama. I'm tri-chair for the Poor People's Campaign. I'm on the National Executive Committee of the National Union for the Homeless and a member of Freedom Church for the Poor. There are 2.1 million poor and low-income people in Alabama, 2.1 million. 964,000 are people of color. 1.1 million are white. 1.1 million are white. But when we think of going to the media and the politicians, you would think they were all black. That's why they keep us separated. The city of Birmingham in 2016 voted to increase the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, unanimously. The city council. The ink had not dried on that before the state legislature went and made it illegal against the law for any municipality to raise the minimum wage.
Shame.
They stole our democracy in order to do that. People are dying because they're not covered. Alabama refuses to cover. You know, what we have here is welfare for the rich. Okay?
That's right.
Okay? Walmart is one of the biggest beneficiaries of public assistance in this country because they don't pay their employees enough. I am tired of subsidizing the profits of Walmart and these other corporations that are not paying their fair share.
Tired.
Yet they want to make it sound like if you're poor, you're trash. In Alabama, they call it white trash, too. The city council, voted to pass an ordinance to make it illegal for the homeless to sleep anywhere on public property. I asked the city council member who introduced that, I said, where are they going to sleep? You can't sleep on public property, you can't sleep on private property. His answer was, I don't care.
Shame.
We're not surviving out here, we're dying. We're dying. We can't wait till after the midterms.
That's right.
Thank you.
Can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Forward together.
One step back.
Thank you.
As others come to the congresspersons, one of the reasons that we reached out to Representative Rokana and others and the Progressive Caucus and Black Caucus, because let me tell you what they're telling us out in the field. I just talked to someone running the other day for office, I won't say what party, as others come.
Can I call them
Yes.
up? We will have Reverend Ari Douglas from Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign, Reverend Hannah Broom from North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, Jean Stoken, Sisters of Mercies of the Americas, and Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove from Red Letter Christians.
I was told by someone running for office to be in this place. The consultants told him not to say the word poor. Consultants told him not to say the word poor, not to say the word, not to bring up living wages, just to talk about January 6th and IRA and abortion. And yet in that particular person, the district they're in is over 50% poor. Y'all know, if we be honest, because some of you have said it to me in private, nobody talks about poor, most debates up here. They talk about some folk, few folk do. This is why we're saying there has to be a vote before November. We're not afraid of losing. We're afraid of the American people not knowing who stands where. And that vote happened back again, but it needs to be one more on these three issues so it is clear. And combined Progressive Caucus, Black Caucus, and our friend, we know with this power in this room and yours, we can get it done. And if you do it, you will see a massive turnout of low-income voters like you've never seen before. The truth of the matter is more turned out in the last election than this in 2020 because they heard some stuff about living wages and they heard some stuff. They need to hear it again.
Reverend Ari.
Good morning. I, Reverend Ari Douglas, and Tri-Chair of the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign, come to you today, an ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, who has the honor of being the pastor of First Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Janesville, Wisconsin. The Christian Church Disciples of Christ has had the distinction of being the religious home of James A. Garfield, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Ronald Reagan. We, among the other 7 sisters of Protestantism, tend to use the lectionary for our Sunday morning scripture. For those of you who are church-attending Christians, you may have noticed from the gospel passage this last week in Luke 16 that Jesus says you cannot love God and money. You cannot love God and money. And perhaps to the chagrin of your pastors, I'm going to give you a sneak peek into this coming passage for this coming Sunday. It says from 1 Timothy chapter 6, love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. I want to tell you what kinds of evil this is the root of. It's the kind of evil that keeps my parishioners from earning what is equitable. It's the kind of evil that keeps my parishioners from getting the kind of health care they need. It's the kind of evil that keeps children in my church from getting what they need. I'd like to tell you briefly about 2 members of my congregation. These 2 are single mothers who have escaped abusive relationships. They've done all that they can to take care of their children and support one another. Unfortunately, neither of them makes enough money to get on by their own. The church helps as much as we can, but we're a low-income church. And besides that, should not be the responsibility of churches to make sure that people get the money that they need to live. No, it has been more since 1964. Real wages have not gone up by more than $2. And these individuals, and these parishioners of mine are facing cancer, which they cannot afford medical treatments for due to a lack of health insurance. And they have young children that they are responsible for. I implore you to pass another tax credit for children, to pass universal health insurance today, not in 10 years. We don't have another 10 years. And to pass a real raise to the minimum wage.
15 seconds.
Don't wait until November to do this. Vote immediately. Amen. And forward together.
Not one step back. If you see any members leaving, some of them have votes, but this is being taped, and this is important, so stay on the record, because this happens all the time. They have to go do those votes. Yeah. Now that's a vote.
So first, thank you. You're our champions on these issues. I'm Jean Stoken, and I serve on the justice team for the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas, a Roman Catholic congregation of vowed sisters. which has hundreds of social service agencies, educational and health institutions across this country serving impoverished communities. And we are honored to stand with the Poor People's Campaign in this appeal with urgency for the Congress to act. When Pope Francis visited Washington in 2015, he spoke to a joint session of Congress, and he said a nation can be considered great when it strives for justice and the cause of the oppressed. He then appealed to members of Congress about its responsibility, saying, "You are called to defend and preserve the dignity of your fellow citizens in the tireless and demanding pursuit of the common good." We know people are dying, hungry children. Literally every day, millions are dying and suffering from the effects of poverty, systemic racism, and injustice. Minutes matter when it comes to taking action. We are better than this as a country. We have abundant resources, but misplaced priorities. We are deeply troubled that there's never a real debate in Congress about the bloated, obscene Pentagon budget, over half of it going to for-profit private contractors, and we thank Representative Lee and Representative Khanna for your leadership on that issue. And how dare Congress discuss tax breaks for corporations before there's policy choices to lift families out of poverty? The data shows the child tax credit works, and it's an important program that needs expanded. Our faith teaches about the preferential option for the poor. Each one is sacred, and we have a moral responsibility to lift up from the bottom. The clock is ticking. We cannot kick the ball down to a future Congress. The moment is now. Let us all make America care again. Thank you.
The moment is now. The moment is now. The moment is now.
Hello. I am Reverend Hannah R. Broom of the Amy Zion Church and National Faith and Justice Organizer for Repairers of the Breach. Social justice advocate Brian Stevenson stated that the opposite of poverty isn't wealth, but justice. The righteous, in Proverbs 29:7, the righteous care about justice for the poor, but the wicked have no such concern. Our righteousness is seen in our regards for others, particularly those in need. The wicked are unconcerned about the poor because they're only focused on their own desires. Our economic policies should be propelled by the values of accountability, economic security, and opportunity for all, not greed, not privilege, or the interests of a few. But that's far from what we're seeing today, with working American living standards continuing to decline while the richest 1% holds the nation's wealth. Reclaiming that promise of opportunity means demanding an economy that works for everyone, not just the richest members of society. We need our collective power to invest in building up communities sustainably. If we use our collective energy and strength to do away with the yoke of voter suppression that silences the voices of all people, to stop pointing the finger to criminalize the poor, to eliminate the political stunts that show the lack of humanity and empathy, and silence the malicious talks laced with hate, we can begin to spend ourselves in lifting the standard of living for the poor and the working poor with proven legislation and a living wage that carries them from suffering to succeeding. Enable voting rights that gives everyone an equitable opportunity for their voices to be heard, which dismantles the system that favors a few and marginalizes the many. As a collective of faith leaders and faith communities, we can come together as a shofar bellowing before a battle that is not about one side or the other, but often a third way, a better way. Let us demand that we go and build a better way, where we embrace truth and grace, lament and hope, protest and prayer, trust and action. Then our light will rise from the darkness, a light that illuminates hope, whose beam radiates healing, renewal, and transformation, and whose rays shine on a promise of a better life. Let's demand better.
Let's demand better.
And better.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove. I'm a Baptist preacher from North Carolina and part of a network of red letter Christians. We try to preach and follow the words that Jesus said. They're in red letters in some versions of the Bible. I'm here today with all of my colleagues here I want to thank Congress, both you and your colleagues, for doing something that I don't think happens very much in the United States, but I think this year Congress really has used its power, particularly through public hearings, to highlight the big lie. And I think we've seen that it makes a difference. And so I wanted to say that what we're talking about here today is perhaps a bigger lie. And it's bigger because it's been told for a lot longer than the lie about the 2020 election, and it's bigger because it's killed a lot more people. And the lie is that poor people are to be blamed for their poverty.
Say that.
When we had a hearing with the Budget Committee, we heard it from a member of Congress. He repeated that lie. We've heard it in our churches for years, and we've had to fight it there. And we heard it very clearly from Senator Manchin when asked if these policies that have dramatically impacted poverty just in the last year could be extended. He said that he didn't want that money being used to buy drugs. We're here as people who serve folks in poor and low-income communities because we know what these policies did in our communities. We saw it. We saw families that didn't have to worry so much about the rent, that didn't have to choose between medicine and food. I saw families in my church who actually for the first time had a chance to send their kids to arts program at the theater in the community. This is what we saw people doing, and we saw the difference it made. And we have seen that those programs have not been extended. And the emergency that continued has gotten worse again. So we're asking you through this ask for votes to use your power and do anything else you can, please, to expose the bigger lie, the lie that we see killing people every day. Thank you.
That's right. Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Thank you so much. We will. Oh, yes.
Congressman Troy Carter just introduce himself. First, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Hi, Congressman Troy Carter from Louisiana. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this discussion. And more importantly, thank you, Reverend Margaret, others for your leadership, your commitment. In this country, we should not have.
That's right.
We should not have people that are in poverty.
That's right.
We should not have people who are hungry.
That's right.
And we can, and we will do better. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of this. I know that we're more than just listening. We're ready to do action.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We will now hear from Reverend Adam Taylor, President of Sojourners, Bishop Vashti McKenzie, the President and General Secretary of National Council of Churches, Imam Safik Hadovic, the head of the ISNAs, which is the Islamic Society of North America's Office of Interfaith Community Alliances and Government Relations, and Rabbi Jonah Pesner, Director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism.
Just as they plan to come, I want to ask Liz to come over this way just a second. And again, as Johnson said, we want to thank Congress for proving something we've been saying, because the things that have been done, like in the Recovery Act, child income tax, it proved that it works. It works. We just need enough policy, permanently enough to deal with enough people. And that's why we're saying there's got to be a vote before November, because you cannot let that army stay dormant in this election. And and for the moral reasons, they've got to move. But I want Liz to stand here a minute, and let me have that, Rabbi. I want us to stop for a second. And Liz, I'm gonna ask you a question. Is it the truth that 700 people die a day from poverty?
It is.
At Lowell?
In the richest country in the world.
Is it true that 250,000 people die a year from poverty?
Easily prevented. But true.
While the insurrection was terrible, is that more people by 1,000 than died on January 6th?
No, it is not.
That's not more. 250,000 people is more people than died on January 6th.
250,000 is a lot more people.
You see, this is what we're wrestling with. What if 250,000 people in military were killed? what would this Congress be doing?
But in every
What if
resource.
250, what if 700 people died in any district in this, that's sitting here, all these 400 plus, if 700 people just died one day?
One day.
We remember when 7 people died from vaping, 2 died, and you remember? Congressional hearing. Presidential White House discussion. 700 people. Bishop, actually, I have had to repent of lying in the pulpit. Because I used to just say, God called people home. And God said, if you tell that lie again, you say, God may welcome you home. But you are burying people who are dying from policy murder.
Say that.
And you better not ever tell that lie again. If somebody dies because they didn't have health care, because they couldn't eat, because they didn't have living wages. We believe if this kind of argument becomes, not we're voting because we're Democrats, we're voting because, but we start bringing this to the floor and the floor debate. If you vote against this, you're voting for 250,000 people to keep dying.
Every year.
America needs to hear that debate.
That's right. That's
to
right.
deal with this big lie.
That's right.
And that's what we're willing to help with.
That's right.
Because that's the only way it's going to happen. Moral fusion coalitions. That's right. Just wanted to put that number in the room.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Reverend Adam Russell Taylor, I'm the president of Sojourners. We're a 50-year-old peace and justice organization. Work with Christians of all stripes and people of faith and conscience to inspire and mobilize people to put their faith in action for social justice. We're a proud partner of the Poor People's Campaign. And I have to admit, I first do want to thank you and other members of Congress for some of the progress that we saw, particularly around climate change and healthcare with the Inflation Reduction Act. But we are here in a posture of lament. Lament is a major part of our faith tradition. A third of the Psalms are Psalms of lament. We are here to lament the politics of delay and denial. Because the politics of the delay is the politics that leads to unnecessary suffering, that leads to unnecessary injustice, and even to death itself. Universal access to childcare and pre-K, paid family medical leave, renewing and expanding the child tax credit, increasing housing assistance, a $15 living wage, and so many other pro-family, not the fake pro-family, but the real pro-family policies and common good policies are desperately needed right now.
Right now.
We also know that there is an imperative, not just to protect the sacred right to vote, but to prevent election subversion. We're grateful that many of you are debating how to reform the Electoral Count Act. That's important, but it is not nearly enough. Now is the time to pass legislation to protect the right to vote and to prevent election subversion. What could be more important than the very survival of our democracy itself? So I want to be crystal clear that what we are talking about, a living wage, voting rights, programs of social uplift, they are a Matthew 25 agenda. They are an Isaiah 58 agenda. They are a Micah 6:8 agenda. Yes, we believe in Imago Dei. And if we are followers of a faith that said every person is made in the likeness of image of God, that means that every people's needs are holy. So we will continue to demand that Congress treats all people as holy, including and particularly the 140 million people that are living in poverty and that are low wealth. So let us work together to affirm Imago Dei. Let us treat people's needs as holy and treat their right to vote holy as well. Thank you.
Amen.
Not one step back.
Good morning. With all due respect to the congressional leaders in the room, friends and colleagues who labor together, and those who are testifying today, I'm Bishop Vashti Murphy McKenzie, the interim president and general secretary of the National Council of Churches. We are a 67-year-old organization comprising 37 denominations, 30 million people representing 100,000 congregations. Hear the word of the Lord. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor. The National Council of Churches heeds the call of Scripture to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. In the last several years, the failure of Congress to renew and extend various legislation has made life harder for individuals and families with children. Children and families are vulnerable. They are vulnerable to poverty, vulnerable due to a lack of proper health care, and they are vulnerable due to the lack of adequate resources. And so Congress must act now. We implore you to enact positive change for the fate of millions of children. Hear the word of the Lord. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against them, how can you say God's love abide in you? Let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. Have you met Michael? Michael is the 3rd grade student in elementary school down the street from the church that I pastored in Baltimore City. Michael would get himself up early in the morning to go to school because that's where his 2 main meals are. And when there is no school, there is no meal.
Shame.
Hear the word of the Lord. Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord. He will repay him for his deed. Have you met Carlos and Irma? They stand at the same traffic stop with their infant, begging for enough money to spend the night in a motel so they don't have to spend the night under the bridge. Their job disappeared with COVID, and their landlord put them out. Have you met Mamie? Mamie, her polling place was moved further away from where she lives. At her age, she no longer drives, and she's worried about getting to the new polling place, standing in line for long hours without food or water so she can take her medication on time. There is power to disrupt poverty for millions of Americans in this room, and there is power in this room to increase their burden. Which path will you take? There is power in this room to disrupt voter suppression and make sure that elections are safe and fair. And there's also power in this room to increase toxic, divisive behavior. There is power in this room to be generous, to change the narrative and set an example to stand for and stand with those who are suffering from racism, discrimination, and those who have been marginalized, excluded, and exploited by others who have been treated as less than human instead of being embraced as siblings and people of equal dignity and worth. There is power in this room and an opportunity to be a champion of living wage, fair voting laws, children, and vulnerable populations. Lord, when did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty? When did we see you in prison? When did we see you living out of your car? When did we see you going to church without shoes? When did we see you searching through garbage for food to eat because the school is closed? When did we see you working 2-3 jobs just to make up one whole paycheck? As you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. The choice is yours. Which way will you use your power? Do what is right, not what is expedient or politic.
There is power in this room.
Yes, there is.
There is power in this room. Thank you,
To
Bishop.
our colleagues, I want you to know we extended the time for Bishop Vashti because she is recently new in that position and because she represents such a broad group of us and because we are so thankful that you sit where you sit in this moment.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Imam.
Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace. Your brother Safed Abed Shadovich. I'm the Imam and Muslim chaplain at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. I am also the newly appointed head of the Islamic Society of North America's Washington, D.C. office for Interfaith Community Alliances and Government Relations. It's a blessing to be with you today. Thank you for this opportunity to share. I've just come back from this Labor Day weekend from ISNA's 59th annual convention in Chicago, Rosemont Convention Center, where tens of thousands of Muslim Americans from all walks of life gathered together. We were joined by members of our brothers and sisters from many other faith communities. During the convention, President Biden shared some welcome remarks to the convention attendees and recognized the contribution